All right, I'm going to go ahead and do chapter 26 via video. Um, there's a lot of content here, and I mean a lot of content here, but we also covered all of it during your sophomore year in my class. Not all of you had in my class, I realize that, but I'm going to give you the quick version and kind of more the college version so we can get to the more in-depth type things as it relates to the Great West and the Agricultural Revolution. All right. So I'm going to point out all of these things, and you're going to notice all of these things have numbers on them. If you guys want some bonus opportunities, you can go through and you can start answering all of these questions. These are actually some of the same questions you answered as a sophomore, so it may be doable, may be easy for you to do that. But this is a statement from Luke Lee, the Commissioner of Indian Affairs, and this is in 1850. And I want you to notice what he says here. He refers to them as the untutored Indians, okay? And these untutored Indians think that labor is a degradation, that there's nothing worthy of his ambitions but prowess in war, success in the chase, and eloquence in council. And it is only under such circumstances that his haughty pride can be subdued and his wild energies trained to the more ennobling pursuits of civilized life. And there should be assigned to each tribe for a permanent home a country adapted to agriculture of limited extent, well-defined boundaries, within which all, with occasional exceptions, should be compelled constantly to remain until such time as their general improvement and good conduct may supersede the necessity of such restrictions. What he's basically getting at here, as you can kind of see, is a statement promoting a national reservation system for Indian tribes. Okay, so what they're getting at here is that they think that all of these Native Americans that are disrupting things in the agricultural West, that they all need to be assigned to reservations. Okay, so let me continue on. If you look at this political cartoon, you'll notice we have an Indian agent by his badge. The Indian agent, you'll notice here, looks kind of like the Monopoly man with top hat, fur coat. He's all dressed up and everything like that, loaded with money, and you'll notice he's got bags that say profits on them. And he's making it rich. How in the world does an Indian agent, the one who's supposed to go between the government and the tribes, how's the Indian agents? How are they making it rich? And you'll notice what the Indian has over here. He has a rifle in one hand and starvation rations in the other. And what the political cartoonist is trying to say, notice the title of this judge cartoon is The Reason of the Indian Outbreak. Okay, what's really causing the Indian outbreak? Now, Indian outbreak, what they mean here is that the Indians are getting off of their reservations. And when Indians get off of the reservations, that's when white people start losing their collective minds and getting freaked out, okay? Because they think every time an Indian gets off a reservation, they're going to go and kill a bunch of people, right? Why are Indians leaving the reservations? Because they've been promised loads and loads and loads of rations from the government to take care of them and everything if they'll stay on the reservations. The problem is the Indian agents who are supposed to be assigned to bring them their rations are actually selling all of those rations to people living out there in the West, making all the money off of it and giving just the bare minimum amount of rations to the Indians. So the Indians aren't getting what they've been promised, which you're going to notice in this chapter is a stinking theme. Okay, it is nonstop. They were never treated right, and our government has a long record of abuses towards our native populations. You'll see here that Big Eagle is describing, and again, you've got access to this PowerPoint, so you can read these things in their entirety and see what I'm talking about. But he's describing the Dakota War of 1862, and essentially what happened is we did have a whole bunch of Indians get off of the reservations, okay, and then they went and they did start attacking white settlements and things like that because again they were not. They were not being fed. And when they did get off of the reservations, killed a bunch of white people, then this is in the middle of the Civil War. Bear in mind, 1862, okay, Civil War went from 1861 to 1865. In 1862, the Native Americans kind of thought that since the white guys were all tied up, killing each other in the Civil War, that now would be the time to attack anyway. It just didn't turn out to be that way. This is actually during President Lincoln's term in office. So there you go. They're going to go send in the army. They're going to bring them from kind of the fronts, if you will. send them to go put down this native uprising in the Dakota War. And ultimately, what we're going to see is that they're going to execute. This is the largest single execution in United States history at the hands of the United States government, the execution of 38 Sioux Indians at one time. And they're trying to prove a point here and everything like that. So that's going to kind of set a standard. Now, that starts the national conversation. And this absolute piece of crap down here that we see is a guy by the name of Colonel John M. Chivington. Okay, now Chivington was an absolute racist scumbag that wanted to kill as many Indians as he possibly could, and he's actually going to be pretty successful at doing it. Notice his quote here. He says, "Curse any man who sympathizes with Indians. I've come to kill him, and I believe it's right and honorable to use any means under God's heaven to kill Indians." He goes on to say, "It's simply not possible for Indians to obey or even understand a treaty. And I'm fully satisfied, gentlemen, that to kill them is the only way we'll ever have peace and quiet in Colorado." So what does Chivington end up doing? He tells them at that same Camp Weld meeting that we were looking at just a second ago, he tells them, if you'll stay on the reservation, you will not be harmed. Your persons will be okay, but you have to stay on the reservation. Again, no rations make it to the Indians. And so some of the young bucks are going to get and leave the reservation to go hunting. They're going to go find deer, buffalo, anything they can find to feed their people. But the other thing Chivington told them, as long as a white flag, the flag of peace, flies with the United States flag in the middle of the camp, that they will not be attacked. They'll be seen as a peaceful camp. Well, those young bucks left the reservation, went hunting, everything like that, leaving nothing but women, children, and the elderly behind. And this is going to result in what we now call the Sand Creek Massacre on November 29th, 1864. And in this particular instance, we see a couple hundred of these people that are absolutely brutally massacred at Sand Creek. And when I say brutally, there's quite a few descriptions that you can read here because there was a congressional investigation into what happened at Sand Creek. And what John Smith here, different John Smith, by the way, says, he says, "I saw the body of those lying there cut all to pieces, worse mutilated than any I ever saw before. Women cut all to pieces with knives, scalped, their brains knocked out, children 2 or 3 months old, all ages lying there from sucking infants up to warriors. And by whom were they mutilated? By United States troops." And then we see Stan Hoig is going to go into even more graphic detail when he says, "Fingers and ears were cut off the bodies for the jewelry they carried. The body of White Antelope lying solitarily in a creek bed was a prime target besides scalping him. The soldiers cut off his nose, ears, and his testicles, and then they end up using his testicles as a tobacco pouch." Again, you're seeing mutilation by United States troops and the 3rd Colorado Volunteers, and so it was a pretty bad deal. There is the investigation into this thing. You see the condition of the Indian tribes in a report of the Joint Special Committee of Congress, in which they reached the conclusion that all of these Indian wars are to be traced to the aggression of lawless white men, always to be found on the frontier. Okay, who's starting all this? Well, it's white men who are trying to incite Indian wars and use every excuse they can to kill Indians, just like Colonel John M. Chivington did. This is eventually going to lead to the Treaty of Medicine Lodge Creek, in which they're going to end up reducing the size of the reservation, but increasing the rations. But again, as we know, the rations aren't making it to the Indians. We also have the Treaty of Fort Laramie that's going to come about in 1868, which is going to essentially be an effort to keep the Indians in the Black Hills and the Black Hills only, and is also going to deal with certain things as it relates to, like, if something is stolen by Indians and the whites accuse them of it, they'll have procedures to deal in that. If something is stolen by whites and the Indians accuse, there'll be a way to investigate that. Obviously, you already know that this is going to be a little bit on the unfair side, and you can read that in its entirety here. But it's just a really, really, unfair situation, which leads us into a situation between 1874 and eventually what we see in 1876, in which they're sending a guy by the name of General George Armstrong Custer into the Black Hills. Now, why would they go into the Black Hills? They just now told the Native Americans, Black Hills are yours. Nobody wants the Black Hills. Well, while the 7th Cavalry is stationed there, supposedly protecting the Indians, somebody comes across gold in a creek there. One of the soldiers does. Now, they never really found this huge amount of gold, but that didn't stop them from claiming that this is the new El Dorado and the city of gold and everything like that. Again, they never really found a whole lot of gold, just a small 10-cent dig. But pretty soon the whole country thinks that there's gold in the Black Hills. And so the very Black Hills that the United States government told the Sioux people that they could have and nobody's going to bother them there, they end up streaming right into those Black Hills. And it's going to incite some pretty bad stuff. If you kind of know what already is going to happen here, George Armstrong Custer, really arrogant piece of crap, says there are not enough Indians in the world to defeat the 7th Cavalry, until there were. Okay. A huge confederation of Indians are going to gather, and they're going to actually make camp at a place that the Indians called the Greasy Grass. We know it historically as a plain on the side of a branch off of the Bighorn River, and the branch off the Bighorn River was called the Little Bighorn. And the Battle of Little Bighorn is going to be an absolute disaster for Custer and the 7th Cavalry. What's kind of crazy is that Crazy Horse had a dream, okay? And Sitting Bull had a dream, and both of these guys seem to have had revealed to them that there were Indians standing and a whole bunch of dead soldiers. All right. And so, from the native viewpoint, they believe they already had the victory before the battle ever happened. So, sure enough, what's going to happen? Custer is going to go down because he wants to kill Indians, and he's going to take his main body of men back over here. You can kind of see where the Indians are encamped here on the Greasy Grass, right? But you also have Reno and Captain Benteen that are going to have two contingents. Benteen is going to be kind of the reserve troops up on the hillside. Reno is going to go ahead and cross the Bighorn here, and theoretically, Reno is going to be able to chase them from here so that they all end up in Custer's face over here, and Custer can kill them all whenever they get there. The problem is Custer rejected every bit of information that came his way, didn't believe there was near as many Indians as what people were telling him and his scouts were telling him, the native scouts were telling him. And sure enough, these Indians are going to absolutely overwhelm Custer. By the time it's all said and done, all of Custer's men are dead, every last one. There is a little bit of a rumor that one guy did survive, some historical evidence that indicates that might be true, but for all intents and purposes, everyone in the 7th Cavalry and Custer's command died. Most of Reno's guys are going to die, and even a small portion of Benteen's guys are going to die. But all of Custer's guys die up here at what becomes known as Custer's Last Stand. The last communication we have from Custer is, Benteen, come on, big village, be quick, bring packs. Yeah, no crap, you idiot. They got flat out owned by a confederation of Sioux and various other tribes as they were there. So that's 1876. Bear in mind, that's the centennial of our country. Our country was born in 1776. So in 1876, this is supposed to be a big deal, right? If you notice the date, did I have the date of that? I did not. Anyways, it's in late June, 1876. So understand, on the 4th of July, 1876 is the 100-year birthday of our country. And so literally right before our country turns 100 years old, the last thing anybody really remembers is a whole bunch of Americans dying at the hand of Indians. This is not going to pan out well for the Indians, if you can't already tell. What's going to happen is they're going to crack down like crazy. The Battle of Little Bighorn was their biggest victory, but it was in some ways their biggest defeat because it's what led to all of this stuff. We have a rise because by the time you get to 1890, the Sioux people are just devastated. They're extremely poor. They're stuck on a reservation. They're not being fed adequately, and they're clinging at any sign of hope they possibly can get, and which is where a belief system that we know as the ghost dance is going to come about. And basically, you can read through here. I'm not going to read it to you for now, but the basic points here in the ghost dance are that Jesus has spoken to some of these Sioux medicine men, right? One specifically by the name of Wavoka, which is not the guy you're getting quoted here, but Wavoka is kind of the originator of this thing. And he believes that God has shown him that there's coming a time when the Indians are going to see a full revival, that they're going to take back all of their land. And basically, the God is going to give them back their land. All of their dead relations will come back alive. All of the dead buffalo will come back alive. And that as long as they do a ghost dance, and if they'll wear the ghost dance shirts, the bullets can't harm them. Okay, and so they're going to go out there, and again, this is all just a belief system. There was no real threat from any of this stuff. Okay, so this is kind of where we're at. All right. Um, we see kind of the ghost dance taking place here. You see them wearing their ghost dance shirts. Some of the very Indian agents that have been dealing with them said this is not a big deal, and yet the government's going to crack down on them. They're going to confiscate their weapons. They're going to start outlawing the ghost dance itself as a belief system, and they overreacted, because again, that's what our government freaking does. And it's really stinking annoying that we overreacted to this degree. So what do we end up having? Well, I want to go ahead and take a segue here to give you an idea of the way historiography works. Helen Hunt Jackson, she was a part of a group of people known as the Friends of the Indian. And in her very epical book called A Century of Dishonor, she outlines the history of abuse of the American Indians at the hands of the American government. And again, her ideas to fix this, we would not be a fan of once I describe those things to you. But she's at least outlining that there is something wrong with the way the government has treated the Indians. Duh. Okay, absolute duh. Sitting Bull is going to be playing a part of this thing in the rise up to this. He's still the most famous Indian around, but he's not a threat at all. He's just out living in the Badlands. If you've ever been into South Dakota, you kind of know what I'm talking about there. It's kind of an awesome little place, but it's a refuge that is crazy amounts of acres wide. Nobody's going in there. Nobody's going out of there. He's not a threat to anybody. But they're going to send the Native American police, okay, in to arrest Sitting Bull, and in the process, a gunfight ensues that is going to kill Sitting Bull. So now you've killed the most famous Indian alive, and the natives were not really much of a threat. Now all of a sudden, we've got ourselves a big problem on our hand. The only real hero left for them, left over from the Battle of Little Bighorn days, was an Indian by the name of Bigfoot. Okay, Bigfoot though also has dysentery, also has some major health problems, and he's kind of lying on his deathbed. But he is in the Badlands with a pile of Sioux Indians there. They're going to send a contingent of troops to go and disarm this group of people under Bigfoot. Now you can kind of see where this is set up here. You have the artillery that's on the hillside overlooking the Sioux camp. The cavalry camp is here. And then they have all kinds of Hotchkiss guns that are set up in various places here, and they're going to send the troops here to disarm the Indians. If you guys remember from your sophomore year, the role of a certain hearing impaired Native American boy is gonna be pretty deadly here, because he had no idea what he was being asked to do, and he did have a gun. Okay, he's probably the only Indian that really did, but he did have a gun. But he didn't understand why they were trying to disarm him, because again, he's deaf, he's hearing impaired, and so sure enough, his reaction is going to cause a chain reaction. That, long story short, all of these Indians that have been brought here under the guise of peacefulness, 300 and some odd of them, mostly elderly, women, children, they're all going to die at the hands of United States troops. This was originally referred to as the Battle of Wounded Knee. We now refer to it as the massacre at Wounded Knee, because you can't really have a battle if the other side doesn't have weapons, right? So this is Wounded Knee, and what happens at Wounded Knee. You can kind of see what's going to be the aftermath of this. These are the Casey Scouts returning from Wounded Knee in 1890. A blizzard set in, not uncommon for that area if you've ever been there. And by the time the snow thaws and they're able to go back out there, this is what's left. Just a whole bunch of dead Indians that are on the ground, frozen. You can kind of see the Bigfoot lying there, still frozen. He's dead, by the way. We can see the medicine man that was kind of a little bit, if you read the primary source, he was kind of in the provocative side, and he was kind of saying, "I've lived long enough," throws dirt in the air, and almost tried to incite the guys. But we build a big mass grave, and mass grave there is for all the dead at Wounded Knee. And ultimately, what you need to know about this is that Wounded Knee was the end of Native American resistance on the plains. Okay. What brought the end of this resistance? Well, number one, we've depleted the buffalo. If you can't tell, these are buffalo bones that are just piled up there. They're killing buffalo like crazy. Okay, they're just shooting them to kill them because their belief is that if you kill all the buffalo, the Indians will stop fighting, and we can stop worrying about white people dying. Even though, let's be real, right now it's just Indians dying. So they're going to kill all the buffalo. They're going to take all the land. You're going to see the iron horses or the trains heading across the plains. And ultimately, the natives are going to stop resisting so much. And so you see surrender statements from Chief Joseph here in 1877. That's very, very, very famous, where he says, "From where the sun now stands, I will fight no more forever." We see Geronimo is going to continue to try to hold out in the American Southwest as an Apache, but even that is going to be pretty short-lived. And we're also trying to assimilate Native Americans, and this is going to be kind of the end of our discussion. There are two kinds of reservation schools, okay? Or Native American schools. There's one that is on reservation, that's there in their culture around where the Indians live, and that's what you can see in the picture here. You can kind of see Native American culture taking place right here around the bunkers and everything at this Native American school. But there are also lots of off-reservation schools, the most famous of which is going to be the Carlisle Indian School, and it's in Pennsylvania. So they're shipping Native Americans from all places across America all the way over to Pennsylvania to go to school. And this assimilation, if you can kind of see the before and after pictures here, they're coming in very heavily Native culture, and they're leaving as white as they can possibly make them. This is a picture at the Carlisle Indian School. You can kind of see the young ladies on the left, and you can see the young boys on the right, and they're there in huge numbers. But the Carlisle Indian Industrial School is the most famous of these schools. We can kind of look here and see what happened with Tom Torlino. Okay, this is the same person here and here. If that doesn't give you any indication of how much change took place. All right. Despite the process of Americanization or assimilation, Native Americans found ways to preserve their culture and history while also learning the social culture of the United States. This is what we're getting into, what's called middle ground. Okay. Middle ground showed that Indians neither were completely assimilated or completely resisted. They found a way to learn the new culture without losing their own identity. Obviously, they're not going to be allowed to speak the Native American language. They're not going to be allowed to wear their hair long. They're not going to be allowed to do anything that is part of their original culture. But they will find ways, okay? They will find ways to let it happen. One of the most famous and iconic paintings in American history is called American Progress by John Gast. We see that this is very much a picture of manifest destiny. And I'm just going to draw your attention to all these white people things that are taking place here between the Mississippi and the Rocky Mountains. Notice that the buffalo are being chased off the plains and the Indians are being chased off the plains. And this is because of the encroaching whiteness or the whitenizing of our country. Okay. Two major things you need to know. Number one, allotment, and number two, education, or what's probably more accurate, re-education. Okay. Allotment means dividing up those reservations, the piles of land that were given to the native tribes, and dividing them up and giving them to individual native families. Okay. So let's get into some of this. What's happening here? All right. We have allotment and education. Let's get into education first. The picture you're seeing here is a domestic science dinner at the Phoenix Indian School. And notice what's happening. All right. We see table settings. We see young Native American kids, both male and female, enjoying a dinner together. And they're being taught how to act at dinner. All right. This is a domestic science class. How do I learn how to act white? All right. Parts of the curriculum here, though, at these Indian schools, they're going to change their appearance, as I've already discussed. They're going to change their name. They're going to give them a white name. right? They're going to restrict them from using their native languages. They're going to teach them domestic science. They're going to teach them vocations or jobs, and various things like that, right? So there's a lot of these things that are taking place, trying to make them fit into American society. This iconic photograph, and I straight up love it here. We see this little girl here, and she happens to be aware that she's having her picture taken, and she's just as adorable as all get at. And all these little native kids, they're praying next to their bed at night, and then she's just kind of sitting here, right? Well, this iconic photo is going to end up being kind of a big deal, especially as a modern Native American artist. I love what she's done here. Okay, a modern Native American artist has taken that photo and turned it into a painting. And if you can see what's happening here, we still see the same little girl that's looking at the camera, and the rest of them that are praying next to their bed. And the title of the painting is "Who's God?" um, because we see them kind of being torn away from their native beliefs and everything like that. And there's some question as to how much they really understood about what they're being taught in these, native schools that are teaching the Christian religion and morality and things like that. But this is kind of where this thing is. The most famous individual, the originator of that Carlisle Indian School, is a man named Captain Richard Henry Pratt. Okay, and he's most famous for saying, "Kill the Indian, save the child." And what he means by that is, in order to save the child that is under all of that, savage exterior, what you have to do is kill the Indian parts of them. Okay, so kill the Indian, save the child. And that was the motto of the Carlisle Indian School. I'm going to skip some stuff here. So, what about land allotment? Well, two things. We're going to see, just like in Oklahoma, this picture right here. This is a map. I used to have it hanging in my classroom and everything, but this map shows you where those allotments were just in Oklahoma on the reservation system. As you know, in our counties, we have 9 tribes. Most of the other counties in Oklahoma are part of the big allotments, like the Choctaw allotment, the Creek allotment, the Chickasaw allotment. You got Arapaho and Cheyenne, Kiowa and Apache, part of the Cherokee Strip up here, and then the Osage, where Osage County is today, we see up here. We have primarily Cherokee country up here in the Northeast, with the exception of those 9 tribes in Ottawa County. What does this do? What is this land policy going to lead to? Right. Well, what I want you to do, all right, I want you to do a quick little bit of research called the Osage Reign of Terror. Just Google the Osage Reign of Terror. And this will be a bonus assignment. If you can be one of the very first 5 people to come and tell me, you can email me, however you want to do it. The very first 5 people to tell me what movie is being made right now, okay, that's about the Osage Reign of Terror, and tell me what essentially happened during the Osage Reign of Terror. I'll give you a pile of bonus points, okay? Um, Easy stuff. There are a number of other things that are in chapter 26. I'm going to leave the rest of that to you. I want you to practice your chapter 26 tests and everything like that. I've sent in plenty of assignments and everything that you can do there. But follow along. Make sure you kind of know what's going to happen. Make sure you know the content. Notice, obviously, we're talking also here a little bit about mining. And some of the old west, the Wild West stuff, ranches that took that are going to give birth to the American icon we know as the cowboy, and the way that plays out. Yeah, talking about Baxter a little bit, even what causes the end of the cattle boom is going to be the invention of Joseph Glidden's barbed wire, right? Joseph Glidden's barbed wire is going to help to end the open range and everything. The Transcontinental Railroad that we've already discussed is going to play a role in this as well. Some of these sod houses out in the west, you're going to see it with American farming, and you'll have questions on that as well. There are 3 specific land acts. You need to know what they are because they will be tested. They are the Morrill Act, which was for land grant colleges, the Pacific Railway Act, which is land money or land grants that were given to the railroads for building the Transcontinental Railroad, and then the Homestead Act, which is basically giving you free land if you can make profitable farmland in the West. Okay, I think we should be pretty close to an end there. Yeah. think we are all together. You do see that this is going to be kind of the other backstory to the rise of populism with William Jennings Bryan. It originally started out as the Grange, then went to the Greenback Labor Party, went to the Farmers Alliance. Eventually, they're called populists, and we have our first populist presidential candidate, and William Jennings Bryan ran as a Democrat in 1896. Obviously, you know that he doesn't win, but he is going to be a man that changes America forever. Anything else? I think that is end of my content, right? So I'm signing off here. Make sure you do all your work. And again, if you have watched this and seen the specific parts I told you about the Osage Reindeer Terrier, you have an opportunity for some bonus there. All right.